During this project, we're going to upload and rig a chosen character. We'll download that character and then choose a pose to 3D print from. I hope you enjoy it. So we're going to use a couple of free browser-based applications to find a model. We're going to download that model and then upload it into a separate application, rig it, and then download that rigged version so that we can 3D print something with some action. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. The application that we're going to start with is Clara.io. You can sign up for this for free. Again, it's browser-based. It will work on a Mac, a PC, or a Chromebook. And when you go to the home page, you'll see your documents will be housed in thumbnails here. In this case, we're going to go ahead and click the library. And one nice feature of Clara.io is that it has this library where you can find models to use for animations or just 3D print them or whatever you want to do with them. In this case, as I scroll down through this page, you can see there's cars and trains and things like that. We could just download those models and print them as is. But in our case, I'd like to take a character, and again, I'm going to rig it in Mixamo. I'm going to download that back into Clara so that I can export that pose that I decide to use for a 3D print. So let's go ahead and let's go through the concept of a T-pose. So some of these models are already in a T-pose. You can see that the Sonic series, and I'll give some props to Jason here. It's in a T-pose. The arms are outstretched. The feet are apart, and it looks like this could be rigged pretty easily. These models here could be rigged as well. Their arms are outstretched, legs are apart. If we go down to this this girl brunette, her hands touching her thigh. So if I try to rig this, not in a T-pose, there's a good chance that geometry would get stuck to each other. So the polys of the hand and the leg would get stuck, and I wouldn't be able to rig that very well. And so on and so forth. Looks like the Assassin's Creed would be a good one to try to rig and print. The Sonic is already in a pose. That's not a T-pose, so that one wouldn't work as well either. So let's just stay very, very basic with this, and I'm going to go ahead and take this the standard male figure by Ben Houston. So props to Ben. I'm going to click on that model, and you can see a preview of what the model looks like. And this is obviously a very simplistic model to rig. But I'm going to go ahead and just go through the process with you so you can see it. So I'm going to click download, and I want to download this as an OBJ. When I click download, it's going to go ahead and take a second to export. Click download again, and it zipped the file, so I drag that to the desktop and expand it. And in this folder is the OBJ. So here's my model. So as I mentioned, the other application that I'm going to use is Mixamo, and you can sign up for Mixamo for free, or if you have an Adobe account, you can sign in through your Adobe account. But I'm just going to go ahead and start from this this home page and click Browse Animations, and all kinds of animations will show up here on the left-hand side. And if I scroll down to the bottom, there are different pages of animations. So there's a lot of FBX files that have been loaded in here, and all kinds of neat actions. So if you could imagine, rather than just printing a T-pose for your character or what somebody has modeled the character to, you can go in and decide, hey, I want this to look like a person got hit in the side, and I'm going to rig it that way and export it so that I can print it. So to get started with rigging, you're going to click Upload Character, and we're just going to drop the file here. You can see it'll take an FBX, OBJ, or there was another type of file that it would take. And it takes a minute or two to upload, depending on your internet speed. Once the character uploads, it will open up in their auto rigger. And it talks about the T-pose and fingers being spread, so on and so forth. You can read through that, or you can check the orientation or change the orientation here with these buttons, rotate it, so on and so forth. So I'm going to click Next. And one nice feature about this auto rigger is it allows you to use symmetry, or if you want to uncheck that, you can move these markers around independently. So if you have a T-pose that maybe he's holding a shield or something like that, and one of the arms is a little higher or lower, so on and so forth, I can uncheck the symmetry, and I can place those markers where they need to be. But in this case, this is a very symmetrical model, so I'm going to use symmetry, and I'm going to place this marker over the chin. And you can see a little preview in the upper right hand corner when you start moving these things around the wrists, so you can be as exact and as precise as you possibly can with them. The elbows, the knees, and then the groin. I'll move that here. And again, read through all the information so you know what they're talking about. Click next, and it will auto rig, and it says it takes up to 2 minutes. So in the amount of time it takes to have a coffee, perhaps, this will auto rig or rig your model for you. So if you've done any rigging in any of the applications like Cinema 4D or Clara, so on and so forth, you know that this can be pretty time consuming, and this is a really, really nice feature that Mixamo gives you. So now the model is rigged, and you can see it moving around in space. It looks like everything worked pretty well, so I'll go ahead and click next. And it says it's been uploaded, and should we proceed with it? Click next, and it will load here, and it will take on any of these motions that I assigned to it. So in this case, this is the bent side motion, getting hit in the side, or I could do the kidney hit, or if I want to be less violent, I can do the sitting clap, or whatever you choose to use for the animation. So I'm going to do an upright pose, and just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and download that. Now we want to download the FBX with the skin, so the settings, we'll just leave these how they are. I'll click download, and after I download this, I'm going to upload it back into Clara and export it from there to be 3D printed. Now when I do that, in Clara, I've had some issues with some funky geometry going on, and I'll point that out when I load it. So I'm going to go back and create a new scene. So click Clara.io, click New Scene, Create Empty Scene, and I'm just going to use the gallery, not the public view. So I'm not going to collaborate with anybody at this point. And I'm just going to drag that FBX file in here. Now you'll see a bunch of weird looking geometry assigned to the model. Ignore that. We're just going to export the model as is, and that geometry will get left behind. So it loads into the scene, and as I mentioned, it has some funky geometry going on here. But I can scrub through the animation if I want to move this around, like it's getting hit in the side or whatever. And I can export this pose and 3D print that. And then I can scrub forward a little bit more and maybe get a different pose, and I can export that if I'd wanted multiple views or versions of this model. And again, in Clara, I've had some issues with this funky looking geometry being attached to the models. That doesn't happen in Cinema 4D or some of the other apps that I use, but when I export the model, that just kind of goes away. I'm sure I could troubleshoot that at some point. But okay, I'm going to go ahead and export this to print. So I go to File, Export, and I'm going to use STL 3D printing. So I click that, and it'll take just a second to export. Click download, and here's yet another zip file to expand. And when I open that up and open the folder, you can see all that other funky geometry came along with it, because I think I just exported all of it. But here's my model. Okay, so this is that pose that we're looking at, and I can drop that into my slicer now. Let me pull the slicer up so you can see it. And I'll go to Edit, Scale to Maximum Size, so you can see this thing. And there's my model, and I can go ahead and 3D print that model in this pose that I selected. So I'm just going to go ahead and scale it down to a manageable size. With most of my models, I like to use as little infill as possible. 3 to 5% works pretty well. I have an open bed printer, so I'm using PLA, and I'm not going to adjust the speeds or anything for this. I do like to include a raft. You'll have to pull that off first, and I'll show you that once we print this, and obviously generate supports. So I'll click OK, and we can also click the supports button down here and generate automatic supports so that you can see those. If I was to have some things kind of hanging off and I don't have the slicer set how I want it, I can always go in and add new support structures as well. So like for the ends of the hands, so that they're not printing out in space, I can just go ahead and add those supports, and I'll go ahead and do that here so that you can see how it's done. I like to actually go underneath the model when I do that. I can see it a little bit better and kind of fill a few of those in. Let me navigate around here a little bit. And the rest of it looks like it should print just fine. So I'll click Done, Prepare to Print. Using that process, click OK. It's going to go ahead and slice it. And it's a 14-hour print, and it looks like it should print just fine. So I'll go ahead and get that printed, and we'll take a look at how to take the supports off. I'd like to do a time lapse though, so I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down just so I get a little bit quicker print. So I'm going to go ahead and bump the size down quite a bit. We'll do like a half scale, and I'm going to go ahead and go back and reset the automatic supports because they will change. Hit Prepare to Print. And this should be a 7-hour print or so. Oh, it's 5, so that will work a little bit better. Smaller print. So I'll click Save Toolpath to Disk. Since I'm printing off an SD card, and I'm actually just going to save the G code on the desktop, and I'll drag that into my SD card later.